I remember the exact second my hand stopped shaking. It was the second I stopped caring. The courtroom in downtown Chicago smelled like cold coffee and old paper. I sat at the plaintiff's table, my lawyer beside me, my fingers laced tightly on top of a manila folder that held 11 years of my life. Across the aisle sat Rebecca, my assistant, my right hand, the woman I had trained from the ground up. She wore a navy blazer I recognized. I had bought it for her as a birthday gift 2 years ago. "Ms. Whitfield," the judge said, looking down at me over her glasses, "you're here to formally withdraw your claim and dissolve. Whitfield Consulting Group. Is that correct?" "Yes, Your Honor," I said. My voice didn't crack. I had cried enough in private. There was nothing left to spill in public. Rebecca didn't look at me. She was too busy smoothing an invisible wrinkle from her sleeve. The same nervous habit she used to do before every big client pitch. Pitches I had prepared her for, line by line, in my own office, on my own dime. 3 weeks ago, this had been my company. My name was on the lease. My signature was on every contract that mattered. Then, one email at a time, one closed-door meeting at a time, my clients started calling Rebecca directly, my staff, people I had hired myself, people whose kids' names I knew, stopped meeting my eyes in the hallway. And when I finally opened the corporate filing cabinet to check the registration documents, I found my own name quietly missing from the ownership papers, replaced by hers, dated 8 months back, with a signature that looked almost exactly like mine. Almost. I built that company out of a spare bedroom when I was 26 years old, right after our parents died, and I became the only thing standing between my 2 younger siblings and foster care. Every late night, every skipped vacation, every client I begged for a second chance, it all went into keeping that roof over our heads. And now I was standing in a courtroom, giving it away like it had never mattered at all. The judge flipped through the folder my lawyer had submitted. Her expression shifted, slowly at first, then all at once. She looked up, not at Rebecca's lawyer, not at mine. She looked directly at Rebecca. "Ms. Voss," the judge said, her voice suddenly sharp enough to cut the silence in half. "Does she know you're—" The judge stopped mid-sentence, and Rebecca's face went white. The judge didn't finish her sentence. She closed the folder slowly, took off her glasses, and rubbed the bridge of her nose like she was deciding whether it was even her place to say more. "Strike that," she said finally. "Continue, counselor." My lawyer, Marcus, glanced at me sideways. I gave him the smallest shake of my head. I didn't know what that meant either. Rebecca's face had drained of color for exactly 4 seconds. And then, just as fast, she rebuilt it, calm, composed. The same face she used to give nervous clients before a big presentation. "Your Honor," Rebecca's lawyer said quickly, standing up. "My client is prepared to proceed with the settlement as filed." The judge didn't look at him. She was still looking at the folder, at something inside it that had clearly stopped her cold. I strained to see the page from where I sat, but Marcus's hand pressed lightly against my arm under the table. Not yet. I sat back, my heart doing something strange. Not racing. Exactly, but tightening, like a fist slowly closing around it. Something in that room had shifted. I just didn't know what. The recess was called 10 minutes later. Marcus pulled me into the hallway, near the water fountain, away from the wooden benches where Rebecca sat with her lawyer, whispering. "Catherine," he said. My actual name, not Ms. Whitfield, which meant he was worried. "I need you to think back, carefully. When you hired Rebecca 11 years ago, did you ever run a background check?" I laughed, a short disbelieving sound. She was 22, fresh out of school. I barely had enough money to run payroll, let alone background checks. "Do you know anything about her before she came to you? Family, previous employers, anything?" I opened my mouth to answer and realized, with a small cold drop in my stomach, that I didn't. Rebecca had always been vague about her past. A small town somewhere in Ohio, a mother she rarely mentioned, a string of odd jobs before she landed at my door with a homemade resume and eyes that looked like they hadn't slept in days. I had felt sorry for her. I had given her a chance nobody else would. "Why does it matter now?" I asked. Marcus glanced back toward the courtroom doors, lowering his voice. "Because the judge just recognized her name from something. I don't know what yet. But judges don't stop mid-sentence over nothing, Catherine." Before I could respond, the bailiff called us back inside. I walked back to my seat, past Rebecca, who still wouldn't meet my eyes. But this time, for the first time in 3 weeks, I wasn't the one who looked afraid. The courtroom settled back into silence. The judge folder was closed now, set to the side, but she kept glancing at it, like it was a loose thread she couldn't stop pulling. "Before we proceed," she said, "I'd like to ask Ms. Voss a few questions directly, if counsel permits." Rebecca's lawyer hesitated, then nodded. Rebecca stood, smoothing her blazer again. That same nervous tell. "Ms. Voss, the ownership transfer documents. Submitted with this filing list, your legal name as Rebecca Voss." The judge said, "Is that the name on your birth certificate?" A pause, just half a second too long. "Yes, Your Honor," Rebecca said. The judge tilted her head slightly. "And your maiden name, before any prior marriage, was also Voss." Another pause, this one longer. "I'd like to consult with my client privately." Rebecca's lawyer cut in. "You'll have that opportunity," the judge said, not unkindly, but firm. "I'm simply establishing facts for the record before. I rule on a business dissolution that affects a company built, by all accounts, over 11 years." She turned a page in a separate folder. Not mine, I realized. Her own. Something the court clerk had apparently pulled during recess. I felt Marcus go very still beside me. "Ms. Voss," the judge continued, "are you aware that the State Attorney General's office issued a consumer protection advisory 2 years ago regarding a business consulting scheme operating under the name Rebecca Voss Hartley in Columbus, Ohio?" The room went silent, in a way I had never heard a room go silent before. Not peaceful, airless. Rebecca's lawyer stood halfway out of his chair. "Your Honor, that's not relevant to—" "It is entirely relevant," the judge said. "If the person seeking to take sole legal ownership of a company has a documented history of doing exactly this before." I turned to look at Rebecca, really look at her, for the first time in weeks, without the fog of grief clouding my vision. The tilt of her chin, the way she stood just slightly angled toward the exit, like she'd done this dance before and already knew which door to run to. 11 years. I had let this woman into every meeting, every client dinner, every late night when my siblings were asleep upstairs and it was just us and the spreadsheets and the coffee going cold. I thought I knew her better than I knew myself some days. I didn't know her at all. "Your Honor," I said, before I even realized I was standing, "I want to see that file." The judge looked at me for a long moment. "I think," she said quietly, "you're going to want to sit back down for this." I sat back down slowly, my eyes never leaving the folder in the judge's hands. She nodded to the clerk, who crossed the room and handed a copy to Marcus. He opened it, and I leaned in close enough to read over his shoulder, my breath catching somewhere in my throat. It was a state advisory bulletin, dated 2 years back. A photograph was clipped to the corner. Younger, thinner, hair a different color, but unmistakably her. The name beneath it read, Rebecca Voss Hartley. The bulletin described a pattern, a woman who would take administrative or assistant roles inside small, family-run businesses, work her way into financial and legal access, then forge ownership transfers. Once the founder was distracted by a personal crisis, a death, a divorce, an illness, my stomach turned to ice. 11 years ago, I had just buried both of my parents in the same month. I was 26, raising a 14-year-old, and a 9-year-old, drowning in grief and paperwork I didn't understand. And into that chaos walked a soft-spoken young woman with a homemade resume, who told me she understood loss, who cried with me during my father's memorial, who made herself so indispensable that I stopped checking my own contracts because I trusted her too. She hadn't found me by accident. Your Honor, Rebecca's lawyer said, his voice tighter now. My client has never been charged criminally in connection with that advisory. It was a civil matter that was settled without admission of wrongdoing. That may be true, the judge said, but I'm not deciding a criminal matter today. I'm deciding whether to approve a dissolution, filing built on a set of ownership documents. I now have serious reason to question. She looked at Rebecca directly. Ms. Voss Hartley, did you forge Ms. Whitfield's signature on the transfer of ownership, dated 8 months ago? Rebecca's mouth opened, closed. For the first time since I'd known her, I watched her search for words and find nothing. I want a continuance, her lawyer said quickly. My client needs time to. Denied, the judge said. I'm ordering an immediate forensic review of the signature in question, along with the company's financial records for the past 12 months. Until that review is complete, the ownership transfer is suspended, and Ms. Whitfield remains the legal owner of record. The room blurred slightly at the edges. Marcus's hand found my arm again, steadying me. Rebecca finally turned to look at me, not with shame, with something colder, calculation, like she was already 3 moves ahead, already planning her next small town, her next grieving stranger, with a spare bedroom and a broken heart. This isn't over, she said quietly, only to me. She had no idea how right she was. The forensic review took 11 days. I know because I counted every single one of them, the way I used to count the days after my parents died. Like counting was the only thing keeping me upright. Marcus called on the morning of day 12. Catherine, he said. The handwriting analyst filed her report. It's not close. The signature on the transfer document doesn't match yours in 14 separate structural points. It's not even a good forgery. She got sloppy near the end. Probably because she thought no one would ever look closely. I sat down on the edge of my bed, the same bed I'd been sitting on every morning for 3 weeks, staring at a closet full of blazers I no longer had anywhere to wear. What about the financials? That's the part you need to hear sitting down, he said. In the past 12 months, Rebecca moved just under $300,000 out of the company's operating account into a personal LLC registered under yet another name. Rebecca Hartley Consulting. Same woman. 4th name we've found so far. $300,000. That was payroll for my staff. That was the fund I'd built for my younger brother's college tuition. The one he was starting in the fall. That was 11 years of nights I didn't sleep. Condensed into a number Rebecca had wired away like it belonged to her. There's more, Marcus continued. The Attorney General's office reached out this morning. They've been building a file on her for 2 years, under 3 different aliases, across 2 states. They want you to file a formal complaint. If you do, it connects your case to theirs, and it stops being a private business dispute. What does it become? A pattern of fraud, Catherine. Prosecutable, not civil, criminal. I thought about the 14-year-old girl I'd raised, now 25 and working in Denver, who still called me every Sunday. I thought about my younger brother, who didn't yet know how close he'd come to losing his tuition. Money to a woman who used to bring him birthday cupcakes to the office. I thought about every client who had trusted Whitfield Consulting Group because it had my name, my actual name, on the door. File it, I said. All of it. There's a hearing in 4 days, Marcus said. The judge wants both parties present. When the criminal referral is formally entered into the civil record, Rebecca's lawyer is trying to withdraw from the case. Is she running? Marcus was quiet for a second too long. Her passport was flagged at O'Hare last night, he said. She didn't get on the flight, but Catherine, she tried. She didn't run far. They picked her up 2 days later at a motel off I-90, checking in under the name Rebecca Hart. Just Hart this time. I imagined by then she'd run out of new endings to give herself. The final hearing was on a Tuesday morning, grey and cold. The kind of Chicago sky that makes everything feel like it's holding its breath. I wore the same navy suit I'd worn to my father's funeral 11 years ago. It felt right, somehow. Closing one grief, with the same armor I'd used to survive another, Rebecca sat at the defense table without her old composure this time. No smoothed sleeves, no soft eyes for the jury of one judge. Just a woman finally out of names to hide behind. The judge read the findings aloud for the record. The forged signature, the 4 aliases, the 2 prior states, the $300,000, the outstanding advisory from Ohio that had never quite caught up to her until it did. Then she looked up, first at Rebecca, then at me. Ms. Whitfield, full legal ownership of Whitfield Consulting Group is restored to you, effective immediately. The court is also entering a criminal referral against Ms. Voss Hartley to be prosecuted under the jurisdiction where the original advisory was filed. With this case attached, as supporting evidence of a repeated pattern, Rebecca didn't look at me as they read the restitution order. Full repayment of the $300,000, plus damage. She stared straight ahead, jaw tight, like she was already rehearsing her next name in her head. I didn't feel triumphant. I thought I would. I'd imagined this moment for 11 days straight, replaying it like a scene I needed to survive to reach. But sitting there, watching a woman who had cried at my father's memorial get let out by a bailiff, all I felt was quiet. Clean, like a wound finely stitched, shut instead of left to bleed. Outside the courthouse, the wind was sharp, but the sun had come out. My brother called before I'd even reached my car. Marcus texted me, he said. Is it true? Is it over? I looked up at the grey building behind me, at 11 years of my life that had almost slipped through my fingers, into a stranger's hands. It's over, I said. And Danny, your tuition's fine. Everything's fine. I heard him exhale on the other end, the sound of a weight lifting that he hadn't even told me he was carrying. I got in my car, started the engine, and for the first time in 3 weeks, I drove toward my office instead of away from it. Not as a woman who had lost everything, as a woman who had simply taken it back.